The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. Good evening and welcome to Down the Garden Path with your hosts, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board this evening, dial 905-725-1907. Toll free in North America, 1-866-905-7325. Worldwide, 1-866-656-5477. Send us an email right now. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Thank you and welcome everybody to this episode of Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I'm Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design for the past 11 years. It is currently a design-only business here east of the GTA. With me is my co-host, Matthew Dressing. Welcome, Matthew.
Hello, welcome, Joanne. Good evening, everyone. I am Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer and owner of Natural Affinity Designs. Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy doing Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you, from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media, emails, and phone calls.
That's right. And we want to thank you once again, always, for joining us here on Down the Garden Path live and in person, almost. Well, we're not really in person, but you know what I mean. We're live. We're here. We can answer your calls and your emails. But also to let everybody know that you can always check out our past shows of Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. This show will be up probably by the end of the week. So if you go ahead and Google Down the Garden Path or on your podcast app, you can subscribe. So every time a new episode is loaded, you will be notified. And we love it when you please go ahead and like, share, or leave us a comment.
Exactly. One day, I think technology will move so far that we will be here in the studio and we'll just be little holograms.
Do you think so?
Rooms.
Gary's gone.
Gary's
okay,
gone.
He's a hologram now because he's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we weren't here last week. If anybody was here last week, we weren't here last week. I'm assuming all went well, and there was a show last week with we replayed our September in the Garden.
That's right. Yes, I did not tune in, and Gary didn't message me. So
so all news is no news, and he's not in the studio, so we don't know. Yeah.
And if you missed it, again, check out us on the podcast.
That's right. So any questions about what to do or what not to do in your September garden, please have a listen to our podcast from a couple weeks ago.
That's right. So, should we do our opening segment, or do you want to dive right in?
I think it's a big topic today,
Yeah.
and I think we should dive right in. And if we've got time at the end, then we can kind of talk about what's happening in my garden and your garden. But I'm
Let's
guessing, what do you think?
Let's
Because
dive right in.
you've done a ton of work, you guys. He is prepared. So this is to segue in a little bit. This is our follow-up show.
That's right.
I didn't look at the date from our first show. Did you?
May 20th.
Okay, so our May 20th, was that the 420 thing, or it was 520 actually?
Yeah, it was 520.
We did a show on growing cannabis. So for all our Canadian listeners, growing cannabis is now legal in Canada. And, we covered, how to grow it, the certain requirements. There's 4 plants per household, that type of thing. So across Canada, things vary slightly, but it is legal to grow. And a lot of first-time gardeners were growing it for the first time. So we kind of did a show on letting people know, you hear people say in passing, oh, if you can grow a tomato, you can grow a pot plant. But, there's a little bit more to it. And Matthew did a great job of coming up with lots of information. So please go back and look. If you have questions about that, go back and listen to that show. But now it's kind of harvest time. Right? Yes. So we thought our listeners might, now that they've grown it successfully or unsuccessfully, big or small, that they would have questions about, now what do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So Matthew's done extensive research, and we're happy to share that information, answer any questions that you may have to the best of our ability. We are also, our disclaimer, is we are not experts. We just have done a lot of the research for you.
Right.
Everybody can Google it, everybody themselves and that kind of thing. But we've kind of made it and try to broke it down so it's as low maintenance, as simple as possible, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. Which is what we do for everything that comes to your garden. We want to help you make it happen.
We do. We do. And, pot is one of those things. Cannabis is one of those things that a lot of people are making happen. So
yes,
we are going to review kind of what to do next with the harvesting. We've grown it. We've listened to the past show.
Okay.
And what do we do? So depending on if you're growing indoors versus outdoors.
Okay. And I think most people, don't you think, are growing outdoors?
Right now, I think a lot of people are starting outdoors, especially the first timers.
Right.
They're growing it in pots and containers in the ground. It's new to them. It's outside. If you grow it inside because you've been growing it for more than however many years.
We won't tell anyone.
We won't tell anybody. Your secret's safe with us, whether you're in Canada or the States.
Well, there's plenty of states plenty of U.S. states, or states in the U.S.
Yes.
Either way, that it is legal as well. So, we know your listeners are from all over. So there's definitely other places in the world where it is legal, and you may be very experienced at growing it.
Yes. And so always please write us at instudio101@gmail.com. We're learning right along there with you, right? So we'd love any feedback or tips or tricks, or if you'd like to add to the conversation.
Okay.
So I was just saying, so indoors and outdoors is fairly pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
Right. You're going to go through the same number or the same kind of steps to kind of harvest your buds, your flower buds that are developing and getting ready. We thought this would be timely now just because fall's starting to set in and we're kind of ahead of the harvest, and we're going to get into where winter's going to come in and kill it, because it is an annual, especially here in the GTA.
Okay. All right.
So
yeah, there's no winterizing it.
There is no winter. Well, yeah, there is no real winterizing it unless
you
have some magic, like you're going in an outdoor system to an indoor system.
Right.
But most people tend to have, you're either all outdoors, you're all indoors.
Yes, yeah. And to explain what an annual is for everybody, that is something that you have to plant every year, much like your vegetable garden. Most vegetables. Right?
Yeah.
Not all. Yeah.
No,
and some of your annual plant flowers and things like that. That's something you have to plant every year. So that's what an annual is versus perennial, which comes back every year.
Right.
Okay.
So we've got our plants. They're looking good. We've got some flower buds. They're growing. We're getting all excited. The first thing to do is hold on to your excitement.
Okay.
You can harvest it too early.
Ooh.
Right. And you can still, smoke it and use it for whatever you'd like, but you're not going to get the same effect that you would have had. So as it ages, and we're going to get into all the details on it's really all comes down to that bud that we all love. How Joanne's giving what?
Yeah, I don't know.
on what
that's
it is.
what's important.
That's
right?
what's important, right?
Okay.
And the chemicals and things that it's developing and releasing, and when we're going to harvest it. So
Okay. Is there a magic date?
there is no magic dates, and that's why it's timely kind of for us to talk about it outside. But if you're growing indoors and you started like 4 weeks ago, you may not have anything to harvest for quite a while.
Right.
We talked about in our last show, there are some auto flowering plants that can take up to, they're really quick. It's like 8 weeks and you've got buds.
Okay.
And then the curing process and thing go on. And that's another
Right.
number of times.
Okay.
So one of the things that people like to do as we get to the bud stage, the buds are getting fat, they're getting ready to grow. They're pistils, the little white hairs. So they're parts of the flower. They look basically like pointy little white snakes that point out.
Okay.
Or little tails that stick out all over the bud. Those are
Okay.
the pistils.
Pistils. Okay. This
Right.
is where he gets all sciencey, guys.
This is
He's
where
got his sciencey face on.
Going to be a sign. Yeah. Joanne's dreading it already.
No, it's fine.
But flushing is the
okay.
technique.
Technique, flushing.
Right. So we've talked about it. If you garden in other ways, you know that leaching the soil, sometimes you over fertilize, or you've got the salts in the soil, and you basically leach or flush the soil out of those salts, relieving the soil of the trapped nutrients that are in the soil itself.
Okay.
So this is a technique that they will use before harvesting, called flushing, and basically it's forcing the plant to absorb and metabolize whatever's left in the soil. So subsequent watering, when you start your flushing, is going to just be pure water. It's not going to be any nutrients or any amendments.
So if you've been fertilizing with every do you think some people were fertilizing with every watering or every other watering or once a week or something?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And some of them are. Lower numbers and water soluble are better for the fertilizing. So they may be doing it every watering or every other watering.
Okay.
The only thing you would do is if you have an issue with your pH, and pH is big for just kind of keeping the nutrients in check without any nutrient deficiencies, which causes stunting and other issues, that you can keep adding your pH adjuster. So you can keep it within the pH range. It is a little tough to change the pH of a soil depending on what kind of water you have or where your source is. So you may or may not need to really worry about the pH with your water. So depending on your setup, though, where you're growing, this is when you're going to start your leaching. So how do you know when to start leaching or flushing?
Or if you need to. Like, does everybody need to?
No, and not
Okay.
everybody does. So if you... Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what I mean. So does everybody... How do you know if you need to flush?
Right. Exactly. So if I know it's such a weird term because I feel like we're talking about something else. But flushing, so if you're growing in like just amended soil, so something like your compost, or your enriched peat mosses,
right, or potting soil and a compost mix, that type of thing.
Right.
Okay.
You don't really need to flush at all. Anything that's natural, organic, you're growing it organically, and you've got the nutrients already there. You don't have to flush.
Okay.
Just kind of let it go. You might be adding some pH adjusters, which is okay. But if you're growing in just pure soil, just kind of like a triple mix, there's nothing really amended to it. It's just kind of dirt.
Or like,
soil.
soil from the garden that you filled in a pot kind of thing.
You found a field, you dug it in. You may want to leach for 1 to 2 weeks because you probably were adding nutrients to it because the soil wasn't optimal to begin with.
Okay.
If you get into, now that we get into weird things, if you get into like the cocoa husk fiber, that kind of amendment or growing media that you like to grow in.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of different things out there.
Like even straight potting soil. Could people have really grown in straight potting soil?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that I put under like your soil growers. Or your organic ones. So so if you're dug a hole and you're doing it that way, you may have to leach 1 to 2 weeks before you harvest.
Okay.
Before you're looking.
And what's involved in leaching? Like that's just...
So it's just cutting off all the nutrients that you're going to give to
no
the
more
plant.
Fertilizing.
Right. And now whenever you water, it's just pure water. And it just flushes any extra nutrients out.
Okay.
And the plant has to eat whatever it's got.
Okay.
Cocoa husk, a little less. You can do it with a week before.
Okay.
And if you're doing a hydroponic, because you've got a contained system of water, you can just drain it a few days before you think you're ready to harvest. And you can reset, put in new water, and keep it going.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that's pretty much flushing. So
Okay.
basically, the one thing to watch with flushing is, though, you will cause the plants to lose some of their colors. They're very heavily fed plants, so they're always getting just the right nutrients at the right pH, or that's the kind of the goal. So they will always look really nice and lush and big and green.
Okay.
As we leach and take away the nutrients and the plant just metabolizes whatever it's got left, there is going to be some loss of color. So that's perfectly fine.
Like the green will fade, or will
Right.
they go yellow, or?
A little bit of both. You might
Okay.
see that it's rich hunter green that might kind of go to more of a medium hunter green with some tinges of yellows.
Okay.
The one thing that they say when getting ready, when you're flushing and you're ready to harvest, when you look at the buds, if you ever Google a marijuana bud or a cannabis bud, it's this big kind of rounded pyramidal thing that's all fuzzy looking, and you can see that there are small leaves that poke out amongst the flower. Those they call the sugar leaves.
Okay.
They're smaller leaves that are amongst the flower bud, but they get a lot of the trichromes, these little growths that some plants, and we'll define that in a minute.
Okay. The science face again.
The science phase
Okay.
again. These trichromes can get on those leaves, and they hold valuable chemicals.
Okay.
So we don't want to.
We don't
let
want them changing
yellow.
color. Okay.
Right. We don't want them to go, because depending on how you treat your bud, again, we're going to talk about that later, you may and or may not be leaving those behind. So you do want them green and healthy for later consumption.
Okay.
So
what happens if you start flushing and those start going?
as they start to yellow, that's where you would
Stop.
consider, depending on where your stage is, you stop your flushing, or just start harvesting.
Okay.
And you,
Okay.
by that point, you probably are going to be harvesting anyways.
Okay.
But how do we know it's ready to harvest?
Right. Because then once you know the harvest date, then you can plan 2 weeks before that for the flushing,
Right.
approximately.
Right. And it's,
Okay.
again, I've never grown it
Yeah.
myself. I have friends and family who have been growing it, and I'm
Okay.
kind of watching and seeing how they're going. So there's a little bit of experience, but nothing personal. So again, instudio101@gmail.com. We'd love to add any information or tips or tricks
That's right.
to the conversation. But so the buds, basically, they get these trichromes that I mentioned. So they are a small outgrowth, usually unicellular, glandular, from a plant or algae or a lichen. So when you look at the bud, they kind of have this, you got the pistils, the little spikes, the little fingers that are coming out of the bud, and they start to get a little kind of a fuzzy thing, and this is the trichrome. And if you look at it under a microscope, it kind of looks like a little jelly stick with a little ball on it. So it's a
Okay.
very interesting, like, little structure.
Right. But let's assume that nobody's going to be doing that, though, with a microscope. Really? You think so?
Yes and no.
Okay.
There are probably some people
Magnifying
that are,
glass?
yes,
what about magnifying
Yes.
glass? No?
Yeah, a magnifying glass. Or one of those little jeweler
I have
probes.
one of those laying around, but I
There
don't
you
really
go.
have a
you
magnifying.
very
I
much.
don't have a microscope laying around.
No,
Gary, do
no
you have a
microscope.
microscope laying around? Do you?
Gary
Wrong
does.
answer.
So on cannabis, it's like that little jelly-like hair that's there.
Okay.
So this is one of the ways that we can use to identify it. One of the more common ways is the pistils. So the long, straight white hairs of the bud, they begin to turn and curl. They'll basically change color.
Okay.
So as you start to see your pistils change color, they'll start to contract. They'll go reddish, green, and or purple. Some of them can go pink. Some of them will actually stay white, depending on the strain or variety that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to know your variety. And I always like to say, and I found this in a lot of the research with any plant, it's always a great resource for asking someone that you already knows growing the plant.
Okay.
Right? And we do that with all sorts of different gardens. Have you grown
Yeah.
this? What's the tip or trick?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Or
that's why
someone
we're
who
here.
who got the plant from,
Right,
right?
or
The grower
someone-
that you got the plant from, for sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe your friends gave you some clones and they've
Yeah.
grown it for years. Perfect.
Okay.
They're a valuable resource. So check that out. So we want to wait until those little spiky out, long, straight hairs are about 50% of them begin to curl. If they're less than 50%, there are many weeks to go before the buds are ready,
Okay.
and they'll actually still grow. So the flower will be there and those pistils will be there, but until they start to curl and start to change, that's when we're going to start to see we're
Okay.
approaching the bud date.
Okay.
So that's kind of knowing your plant and when it flowers. We talk about perennials all the time, right?
Mhm.
hydrangeas start in mid to end of July and go
Right.
through this. Those plants that you're going to grow will have roughly a similar budding and blooming times.
Right.
to
And so
go.
I'm assuming some strains may be earlier blooming than other strains.
Right.
Okay.
So we were saying different strains have different colors. If they remain white, you might have to use the trichrome method, which we'll talk about in a second. But we want to get those little pistils to 60 to 70% curled and colored. So the larger the percentage they are curled, the more THC you have. But if you get too far, you can get into like the 80% range of them are all curled and contracting. Then you're going to get more CBD.
Okay.
So that's the THC, the Delta 9 whatever it is. That's what gives you that high, that euphoria that everybody likes, that we stereotypically think the teenagers are after.
Right.
And the CBD tends to be more the carbinol, the cannabinol, I'm mispronouncing it.
Yeah, the
But
more medicinal.
The more medicinal one, yeah. You can rub it on your hands and relieve pains and aches and
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Okay.
So that also affects your harvesting time, though, too, right? So different strains will produce different amounts of these THCs and CBDs. Will do it better than others. But then depending on what you want to use your marijuana or your cannabis for,
Right.
that's where you're going to adjust and watch for your harvest
Okay.
time as well.
Okay. So if you are looking for the CBD, you're going to wait longer and harvest a bit later.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So far, so good.
Are we with us? Are we all with you?
Yeah, we are with us.
So the trichrome method, believe it or not, because this is, we compare it to tomatoes, and I think like roses, how big and involved growing these plants can be. The trichrome method is actually the more accurate way to do it, to actually measure it. And it's watching those trichromes and how clear they become. So the clarity indicates what level of development and the effect of the cannabis will produce.
Okay. So this is the magnifying glass.
So this is where the magnifying glass comes in. So we're
Okay.
going to look very closely at our buds. We're going to look with our magnifying glass. We're going to see the little trichromes or combs, and there's a different stages they're going to be. So if they're clear, the pistils are probably still long and white and haven't begun to curl. So there's not enough potency. And if you start to take it at that point, we can start to affect the growth and the fattening of the buds. Because at this point, we know the buds are still developing and growing and fattening. So we don't want to cut them yet.
Okay.
If we continue to look, give it a little bit more time, they start to become half clear and cloudy. And I recommend Googling some of this because I've looked on plants too, and it can be difficult if you have an untrained eye what to actually
Look for.
right, what is cloudy and what's not. And,
Right.
and everyone sees things differently. So definitely there's a lot of forums and pictures. This has been out there for a long time.
Yeah.
And you can get cloudy, clear pictures that describe or show you exactly what I'm describing now.
Okay.
So half clear, they start to become cloudy. The buds are still growing, and they'll create more of an energetic effect. So we're kind of at that, they're starting to cloud. We're probably at the 50% to 60% curl kind of thing, and that's going to give you kind of a bouncy high or effect.
Okay.
When they're mostly cloudy, they're probably about 50 to 70% of the hairs have darkened. The THC, the Delta tetrahydrocannabinol,
Ooh, pretty good.
that's the word I was trying to say, is ready to harvest. And this is for the best high with the greatest euphoria and
Pain
THC
relief.
and the pain relief.
Okay.
Right. So that's the 50 to 70% range. Once we start to see the trichrome combs become cloudy, they also may become amber or pink or purple. Or some of them will also just be white. They won't change. They'll just increase in their transparency will vanish.
Okay.
They'll almost become like a solid white. That's usually with 70 to 90% of the curled dark pistils. This will indicate a lower THC and a higher CBD.
Okay.
So this will give you a more relaxing narcotic high, which reduces anxiety. So it's more of a replacing, anti-anxiety medications or using it for those sorts of medicinal type things.
Okay.
Then you can go beyond the harvest point, which most people won't, but they're dark and they're withered. The harvest window is really kind of gone. They're spent.
Okay.
You're starting to lose both of them.
Okay.
And it kind of gives you more of a sleepy effect.
Okay.
So you kind of lose almost all the medicinal or the relaxing and all that kind of stuff we
Okay.
just talked about.
Okay.
So just again, just check in with somebody who knows, who's grown
That strain.
your strain before.
Okay.
Right, because there's all these tips and tricks, and again, just that trained eye kind of thing. So that's kind of your when to harvest. So we're watching for the trichromes and the pistils. The trichrome method is definitely. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying your emails are up and running, folks. If you want to write in,
Yes. If you have any questions,
please
or,
do.
Anything to add to Matthew's research, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I just put out a Twitter and I just put out a Facebook post about what you guys were talking about. So hopefully we'll get some people saying, "Yeah, man, I wanted to grow some of that, but I'm having some terrible time with my plants."
Yeah.
Well, then you came to the right place, folks. instudio101@gmail.com is the email.
Excellent.
I remember on the May 20th show, I think his name was Mike, and I think he lived in the GTA, but
Okay.
he was saying, we tuned into your show, and we're all smoking, and we're having a
they
beer
were
in
out
the backyard.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I just picture people have seen it, and they're here, and they're writing notes.
Yeah,
or
for
they're
sure. Or they're Googling, that type of thing. For
Right,
sure.
Right.
For sure.
Wait a
So it does sound pretty. It's not as visible as waiting for the tomato to turn red and it's obvious, right?
Right.
Or the pepper to turn green and it's obvious kind of thing. So it takes a little bit more science, I guess, or a little bit more precision.
Right. That's a good word.
Analysis to really make sure the timing is right.
Right.
Perfect. So that's kind of cool in a way that different. The longer you leave it, the how it changes the effect.
Yeah, those chemicals all change. Yeah, and as you grow and as you go with it, you will just kind of learn by eye, especially if you grow the same strain all the time, right?
Yeah,
and even if you grow different strains, you'll just kind of get this instinct about it. And that's true with anything. And a lot of people said that, use those words in my research as well. Just kind of go through it. You might make mistakes, and the first few grows are going to be hard.
Yeah.
But always follow your gut. If you're not sure about harvesting, give it another week or give it some more time or call that friend. So
Good.
So
excellent. So if we've determined we're still a few weeks away, right? And we flushed, or no?
So we flushed.
Yes, we flushed.
Because the buds are getting that point. Our pistils are starting to curl. We might start to see some coloring in some different colors. The trichomes are starting to change. We're getting close. But
is there something we need to do while we're waiting?
Not really. We just kind of got to wait to that point where we're going to have that harvest where we're ready to go in and cut the stem.
Okay.
So it's our trimming and our getting into
that's the trimming part.
Right. So
I'm like getting to my notes. I'm like, but don't you say you have to trim it? But okay, so trimming to harvest as opposed to pruning. Okay.
Right. So we are going to prune in the way that we're going to kind of like if you garden normally, you deadhead, or it's like a cut flower, right? We're going to, we're going to look at the buds. We're going to follow. The buds tend to be like multi-stem. There's one bigger stem with some offshoots with some smaller flowers around it. And then we'll go in to like multi-stems as you travel down.
Okay.
So I kind of picture it like if you just think of it like a cut flower kind of way where there can multi-stem.
Okay.
We're going to go down that stem to where we got a single one, and then we're going to cut it off. It's usually a main thicker branch.
Okay.
And that's where we're going to prune it. That's where we're going to start our trimming process.
Okay.
I just noticed Ty writes in, "Hey, hi, just received your tweet. Interesting, weird topic though."
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, Ty, because we as we said at the outset of the show, we did a show on May 20th telling people that we don't know where you are, but in Canada it is now legal to grow marijuana, and so 4 plants per household. So a lot of people have started trying to see how that went, and a lot of other people would say, oh, if you can grow a tomato plant, you can grow a cannabis plant, but there's a little bit more that goes into it. So we did a show on how to grow it in May, and now it's getting close to harvest time. So we thought we'd kind of follow up with that show and let people know how to harvest.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of myths and kind of stigma around it, and it's just interesting. So we just kind of bringing it to light, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. And trying to make it as straightforward as possible for everybody. And And it's a plant like anything else. So yeah,
It really
that's
is.
what we're doing.
But thank you, Ty. We do appreciate you
Yes.
following Reality Radio 101 on Twitter and writing in. We always enjoy
That's
hearing
right.
from our listeners.
That's right.
So-
So if you missed the beginning of the show, then you can download our podcast by the end of the week.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we are into trimming.
So we're into trimming. So when we get into the trimming time, we're going to be trimming, and there's a lot of complicated or somewhat steps, not complicated, but things that we want to do regularly. We don't want to start harvesting and then just stop and leave it for a long time.
Okay.
So if you don't have lots of time, you can just do it a little bit at a time. So we know that, the leaves are turning, we're getting ready. We can do little sections of it at a time. So we don't have to take the whole plant all at once, much like a tomato, right? Where lots of them are going to be very close. We're very ready. It's time to start picking them all. We may not pick every single one. We can leave some tomatoes or some buds on when we have a time we're going to eat them, or we have more time in this case to take care and harvest and do our thing.
Okay.
So we've got our big stalks with lots of flowers. We're ready to trim the buds. So we cut off our flower stalks, take them off, and we're going to trim by removing any of the extra leaves on the stems. So we picture that classic marijuana leaf. We're going to cut off our flowers, but they may have a few of those big leaves. We don't need those leaves for this stage for taking and caring for that bud.
Okay.
So we can remove all of them. And you can just remove it like any leaf. I'm sure we've all picked off a maple leaf or a leaf from a tree.
Yeah.
Super simple.
Just
it's
tear
that
it off,
easy.
yeah.
Just tear it off. Just snap it at the petiole. If you're doing this outside, that's great.
Okay.
This is
You're
easy.
recommending that you should probably do this outside, do it in the garage,
Right.
do it in the backyard. Yeah.
Because wherever you do this, your place will smell.
Right.
And you will smell. And you're going to get it all over yourself.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do in the prep for this as we cut them, wear rubber gloves, have, some plastic or something down that we can catch any cuttings of the leaves, things that we can come into contact that we can wash or remove the smell from.
Okay.
Change your clothes if you're going to go out right after this.
All right.
So why do we trim the buds? So trimming is going to go into our drying and curing, but some of it also comes down to things like aesthetics. So we all have this mental image of what a bud, a marijuana bud looks like, or a cannabis bud looks like. We see it in a lot of the literature, the dispensaries, the magazines. They're all perfect little green, fuzzy, dense little buds kind of things. So this is this look is associated with those who partake or who are into it. This is associated with good weed.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
with having the little leaves, the sugar leaves that we were talking about before, because they're going to grow in that bud. There's nothing wrong with having those in it. The big ones will be removed, but having a little bit of leaves, that's okay
fine.
too.
Okay.
Right. Sometimes, though, the leaves, the harshness is what those leaves come to. And this is, again, why we're trimming. We may or may not be able to get into the bud and remove the little ones that are in there, but we can trim off all the tips.
And the big ones.
Right.
Okay.
The flower bud will burn differently, has a different composition than the leaves do. So this comes down to the smoothness of your smoke or your partaking in it. So the leaves will burn definitely differently as well, and it can be harsher when you inhale the smoke. That on your throat, your lungs.
Okay.
It kind of gives you a rough, weird feeling, like a bad smoke kind of thing. But also the kind of more going into trading and a little bit more of the economics of it, the THC concentration. So the sugar leaves have less THC than the buds, lending to a lower THC level when you compare gram to gram, because the way we sell it and whatnot, right?
Okay.
It kind of offsets the weights, which can be a little deceiving. But that's a whole other conversation.
A whole other show.
That's right.
Oh, that's so funny. Do you want me to read that?
Oh, yeah.
So Kim has written in, hi, I'm a new listener listening from San Jose, California. This is incredible. So cool to hear your tips and tricks about pot on radio. It is kind of interesting, isn't it? Amazing. You sold me on your show, Kim. Thanks very much, Kim, for being a new listener. Like we were mentioning, we did a show. We were all about gardening and all types of gardening. So this in Canada, and I believe in California, is legal, and 4 plants per household. So a lot of new gardeners or people never gardened before were growing it this year. So we decided we did a show in May about how to start to grow it. And now we're doing a follow-up show in September to tell people how to harvest it. So there you go. So if you've got any feedbacks for us, Kim, we'd love to hear it. But thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, Kim.
Okay. So what else do we need? So we want to change our clothes. We want to do it outside. I'm assuming. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh,
No,
yeah,
I'm like assuming you're going to need scissors or sharp
exactly. That's
pruners
exactly
and that types of things,
So-
and probably things that are clean from like other things that you would have been cutting. Right? Like
Right.
I would think that you want to stick them in some rubbing alcohol or something like that. You know, any other plants or whatever, or dead tomato stems. Like I think about me I was cutting dead tomato stems and dead cucumber stems today. You know, like I don't want to use those. Like I want to clean those pruners into some rubbing alcohol is enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just disinfecting, and you're right. You want your clean tools, your smaller, finer, very sharp scissors, but you also need like secateurs to cut the branches and
Right.
take things. And you're exactly right. A lot of people are very concerned, especially the people I've spoken to about growing their own. They're worried about the pests and diseases, even things like powdery mildew.
Okay.
They know it's a mold and a mildew that's out there, and they don't want those spores or something else weird infecting the bud. And that's also comes down to the fertilizing, that harshness, that chemical. One of the reasons why we flush. We
Okay.
don't want that harshness in the smoke or that chemical or metallic show as well.
It is, Alex. Alexis has written in. Very funny show. I cannot believe the topic. This is almost like Breaking Bad. So much involved. Wow. Yeah, it really kind of is, isn't it? There's a lot of steps. Although I think there was way more steps, and I don't even know what they were doing in Breaking Bad. Didn't watch it, but yeah. Anyway.
I like Sarah Jessica Parker, I believe, is the main lead, but in her show Weeds.
Oh, no, it
On
wasn't Sarah
HBO.
Jessica
Who was it?
Parker. I can't think of
I
her
can't
name
think
right
of her
now.
name,
The
but that's who
actress's
she
name will come
reminds
to
me
me.
of.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Sarah Jessica Parker. But anyway.
Anyways.
Yes. Yeah, that was a whole other show on cannabis. So there you go. So we've got clean instruments, which makes sense
Yes.
for sure. Because now this is something like a vegetable that you're
We're gonna
consuming.
right, and most people are gonna smoke it, so we're going to basically vaporize it and burn it and take
Right.
it in.
Okay.
So the only other thing you'd be trimming is, again, we just talked about removing those sugar leaves, the small leaves that cut around it, and you get down to that nice tight bud. But people will decide whether they're going to trim dry versus wet,
Okay.
and there are advantages. So you can trim before you're drying. So if most people are going to do this, if you're worried about mold, you end up having high humidity, which is going to tie into the drying process. There's lots of buds drying in a smaller space, and you otherwise want buds to dry more quickly.
Okay.
Most people are going to cure it because that curing is going to change the chemical composition and give you a better, more enjoyable experience
Okay.
with what you get.
So we would so trim before drying, or you would just do the cutting and then leave it to dry and then do the trimming?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But if people are worried about the mold, then they would do them right when they picked it.
Do it
when they
right
cut
away.
it.
And
Right
you're
away.
just
Okay.
removing all that excess stuff that can trap moisture and hold moisture.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
So you can trim after you're drying if you've got low humidity. Basically, the reverse of what you want to say. You want your buds to dry more slowly. You want buds tighter and more dense looking. And you don't mind your buds losing their color and vibrance. So the drying process, again, can change its color and its appearance and its aesthetics of it.
Okay.
Yeah. You can, however, just cut them off and smoke them directly.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So you can. You don't have to go through the whole big curing process. Again, drying it and curing it and treating it, like we're about to discuss as well, will enhance the overall chemical composition and the enjoyable and the natural strains and natural flavors of it.
Okay.
Right. So curing brings out the true potential for their potency. So drying and curing can actually make up 50% of the quality of your bud as well. So a lot of people find that just, again, wet bud versus dried and cured.
So drying it, trimming it after it's drying improves the quality?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So just going through that whole drying and
Mhm.
curing process.
Okay. So the extra time it takes to do that. And how long do you dry for?
A number of weeks, and
Okay.
you're jumping right ahead
I'm
of me.
sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, well, we can back up. We can come back to that because you had drying and curing. So you can, so you were saying you can just go right directly off.
Yeah,
50% of the quality. Okay, I'm reading your notes.
that's okay.
We do have notes, everybody. We do research this.
Do have notes.
That's right. It's not off the top of our head.
So drying and curing, like we cure like hydrangeas that we bring in, we're going to just hang the flower stalks upside down.
Really?
Hang the
Like,
buds.
okay.
Super easy.
So next to your roses and your hydrangeas, you're going to hang your cannabis.
Cannabis bud, that's
There you go, everybody. Drying hydrangeas is a whole other show, but it's kind of the same principle.
right.
Okay, so really, you're just hanging them upside down. Okay.
Hang them upside down. So you can do it on
Outside, like in the garage or outside versus inside.
Right. You do want it more somewhere inside or protected. You're going to
Okay.
kind of keep them on. You don't want rain or other elements or things attacking them.
Okay.
So just like a hydrangea or a rose, we need to keep it inside and protected. But again, it will release a little bit of that scent.
Okay.
Right. It'll release a little bit less of a scent now that you're not pruning it and breaking it.
Right.
Like we break a tomato leaf, you're right. You can get that smell.
It's not the same smell. But
No,
okay.
it's a whole other smell.
But I know what you
you
mean.
get that smell.
But
yeah.
the fact that
A
it's
smell.
dried, okay, it's going to be less of a smell than the wet.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So now that
Okay.
we're drying, you're right. So, so you want to dry it in a spot that's protected.
Okay.
You're going to dry it at 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit in a place that's about 50% humidity. So depending on how much humidity you have, that will affect how quickly or how slowly
It dries.
it dries and cures and does all that
Okay.
kind of stuff. So you can continue to dry the buds, continue to dry them until the bud feels dry to the touch and until the smaller stems snap instead of bend.
Okay.
So the drier or the smaller stuff will dry first and start to snap. You should be able to pull them from the stem without leaving a small string of stem behind. So if you've ripped a plant off, you rip a leaf, you take a little
yeah.
strip of the stem.
Mhm.
Right. You don't want to do that.
Okay.
So you're going to dry for a few weeks, and then we're going to get to the point where we're going to be curing them and finishing the drying into mason jars.
Okay.
So this is where most of the curing and the drying takes place. So you just basically need 1 quart mason jars when they're dried to the touch, but they're not brittle and dusty. So we're going to hang them.
Not the jars, the buds.
The buds, right? So when
Okay. The way you said that, but no.
sorry, you're right.
Right.
Yeah. So when the buds are
Not
dry
when
to the touch.
the mason jars are dry to the touch. But anyway, okay. Clean mason jars. And then when the buds are dry to the touch, but not brittle or dusty.
Right.
Okay. Fill the jar 70%, 75% full.
Yep.
And they should be able, so you want it loose, so you should be able to shake it around in the
Right.
jar. Okay.
If
With the lid on.
with the lid on.
Or else it makes a big mess.
If they stick, there's too much humidity and moisture in there still.
Okay.
So for a few days, usually for the first 2-3 weeks, you need to open the jars for a number of minutes every day just to kind of drop that humidity and let them dry out again.
Or should you pour those back out onto newspaper or something and let them dry?
Better to leave them in the thing.
Oh, better to leave them in the jar.
Right.
Okay.
Some people will cure them and dry them on racks and stuff, or
Okay.
just use them quicker. But
Okay.
if you're going to go with the jar method, you want to leave them in there. So once you get to that optimal humidity, which ends up being 60 to 65% in the jar, you can basically start leaving it on for 2 to 3 weeks before you open the jar. If you open a jar and you smell ammonia, or kind of a weird funky smell, it's starting to kind of get some bacterial growth in there.
Okay. So
And
now
it's
you throw
still
those
too
away?
wet. You can throw those away.
Okay.
Right.
You should probably.
Right. Yes,
Okay.
you probably should. Yes, I wouldn't. I don't know if anybody else has
Yes,
smoked it at
yeah.
that stage,
Yeah.
but I would. That's
Yeah.
like any other biological thing. Right. It should start to smell like pot, like cannabis, every single time you open the jar.
Okay.
And every time you open the jar, it should get stronger. And that's where you're on the right track. You know, the
Okay.
moisture is in the zone, and you're moving forward, and you're going to get a good cure on it.
Okay.
You can cure for up to 6 months. Anything more than that, and really the chemical change and the compounds as they break down and restabilize and do their thing, there's nothing more. No, there's no more benefits beyond 6 months. So they're cured. It's over.
Okay.
Right. And that's where you just start moving into storing those jars. So creating them so that they're airtight, keeping them out of direct sunlight, off of things with a magnetic charge, like your freezers or your microwaves or things
Okay.
like that. And then you basically store them.
All right.
And you're ready to go.
And then you're ready to go. Okay. So glass jars, neutral charge. Do you need, like, can you just, you say vacuum seal jars and containers to maximize oxygen exposure, but do you really have to do that, or do you?
No.
You're just putting it in a It's not like canning where we then have to boil them or do anything like that,
Don't have
right?
to do anything like that. Usually the 1 quart jars will seal hard enough or strong enough when you get into that curing zone.
Okay.
That they're perfectly fine. You can just start storing those jars as is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't believe no one's written in with their tips and tricks. Come
They're just
on, people.
busy
Everybody, I
writing.
know, they're busy writing. So we will have show notes. All our podcasts come with show notes. So yeah, we will have some show notes too.
Yeah.
So how are we doing? We're good.
We're
pretty
pretty
on
good for time.
Yeah, we're good for time.
Just one of the few last storing tips. Just don't store in plastic bags or containers.
Okay.
Plastic has that static charge, but it also traps humidity and things like that. If
Right.
you're short-term storage, you're moving it or you're taking it with you. I mean, that's commonly seen, the little baggies, right? Whatever. Keep it away where I said just from areas where there's lots of heat. Don't use a tobacco humidor. Most of them use cedar wood, which has the oils that can transfer and influence the flavors of your buds when you do smoke them, right? And they can get other chemicals and humidity, other items being infused into your bud. And then don't store your grinders and pipes and other paraphernalia with your cannabis. When we burn and smoke and stuff like that, the ash and the resin from the burnt cannabis tends to linger and will stink up any storage containers. It also just good etiquette.
Okay, good etiquette. And you say how not to store. So you say don't to store or not to store in the refrigerator.
Right. So don't store in like a freezer where there's freezing temperatures.
Okay.
But not to store in the refrigerator.
Okay, so don't store in the refrigerator.
Right, because you get the fluctuations in humidities and temperatures if your fridge goes out, things like that.
And all your food tastes funny. Anyway.
So what's that smell?
Okay, I know. So
yeah.
And so freezer, store. Okay, store.
I think those were the ones that I just read.
Oh, perfect. You were ahead of me.
I was ahead of you.
He was
That's
ahead of
why
me.
I got confused.
Oh my goodness, we have more. So I didn't think we'd get through all that when I saw Matt's notes. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's only an hour show. But so then you're done. So 6. So you can let me backtrack a bit. Can you because you said you don't have to do the whole plant at once. So then you can kind of have like a staggered production kind of happening, right? Like a little bit at a time, or you can do your whole plant at once.
Yeah. And you usually get into the trimming phase where you're trimming it, you cut it, you trim it, you remove all the leaves, and you start hanging it.
Okay.
You'll probably usually get that far to start.
Okay.
The curing process starts once you cut it because then you've cut off the flow of the sap to the buds.
But let's say now some of the Facebook groups, like, some of the plants are massive, like 7 feet tall. So I mean, I'm thinking they are, trimming half their plant maybe one weekend, and then 2 weeks later they're trimming the other half. Like, so they're going to definitely have a staggered.
Right. So the drying buds, you get like, you're right. You're like lifts or shifts of just, this line is ready. And then a few days later or a week later, that line might be ready.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and it totally depends on your operation. For sure, that could definitely happen.
That's what makes it sound too much like Breaking Bad when you say operation. Really. So really, it's just, your experiment.
Exactly.
Right? We're all new to doing this, for sure.
That's it.
Since I don't know when did the law come into play. Was it October?
I think it was last October 17th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so most homeowners are just going to have, up to 4 plants.
Yes.
Depending on your strain or variety.
And if they made it this far, like some people could have had mistakes, it died or it got overwatered or underwatered, that kind of thing. So definitely, just like all our, sometimes the vegetables this year, our cucumbers didn't do well. Last 2 years, we couldn't keep up with them. So it's just like any other quote unquote vegetable plant or, herb plant type of thing, where some years it has good years and some years it doesn't, or you plant it in the wrong spot and it didn't get enough sun. There are lots of variables, and that's why it's an experiment.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And you're right. It's just we have this big myth around cannabis and these stigmas that we think it's bigger than it is. But you're right. It's a plant.
Yeah.
It's a plant.
Yes. Yeah. That's been around a long time, which you covered in your history of the first show back in May. So, So any other? Again, I was hoping we'd have somebody call in with their tips and tricks, but if everybody's shy and you're just making notes on everything that Matt and I are talking about, then that's fine too.
Yeah.
So there is no magic date. Is there like an approximate date? Like, are we saying October 1st? Are we saying October 15th? Like, do we know?
Yeah, if you're growing it outside, it's probably kind of like your veggies, and you might have some that are at that stage where you're going to have to harvest them before they're just gone anyways.
Okay.
Right? Or you'll just lose it to the winter in our space outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have them in containers and you can bring them inside kind of thing.
Now, what about frost? So what happens if, let's say we have not, it's mid-October and we still have not harvested because it's still not ready according to the magnifying glass, and we get an early frost.
Yeah, that can damage the plant and the buds.
Okay.
That's for sure. And that'll, again, just as you end up harvesting, if you harvest whatever's there, that may or may not affect the chemical composition and how well it translates out into the final product.
Okay. And if we hear there's a frost coming and you've grown your pot in a pot, can you put the pot in the garage or in the house or something like we would do? Like any of our annuals we would do.
Exactly. Just bring her inside and keep her protected as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I hear there's a tip with misting and with your annuals too, and the Florida orange growers usually here is where I've heard it from, is when there's a light frost coming. If you mist it, the plants, the frost won't settle in because the mist has to exchange its kinetic energy with the air, so it won't frost. So that might be a thing if you just cover it up and protect it. But the monetary value of this annual is So,
well, just like the monetary value, I'm sure, of a lemon tree. But yeah, definitely.
Right.
So yeah, there's a few tricks that I'm sure you can try. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then once you've harvested it, does it go bad?
Like
is that show 3?
Yeah, show 3 harvest. No, it can go bad. It can go get moldy, and the fluctuations and the storing and the curing process. If something goes weird, like that bacteria that week, it is like a plant, right? So it can rot or just kind of go funky.
Yeah. So I would say if it doesn't smell good, then it's not good.
Yeah, and if you're not sure, again, ask someone who has and cured and does it well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
For sure.
And since all strains kind of might look different or bud differently or at different times, then that can also help you adjust your curing dates and trimming dates and all of that too.
Right. Definitely know your strain.
Okay.
Right, because they'll all grow differently and color differently, and again, auto flowering versus non-auto flowering, and there's a whole other going on about that too. So
So now everyone needs to go out and get themselves a magnifying glass. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So that is going to help you.
That one that you just use, when you read the crossword or the word find.
Yeah, word find. Yes, for sure. Or the Advil bottle on how many am I supposed to take?
Goodness.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I think we covered a lot, and we have no other questions.
No.
I mean, we can definitely. I hope this was informative. Like I said, please take a look on my website at downtoearth.ca. Matt, you've got the link to past shows on your website as well.
That's right. naturalaffinitydesigns.ca.
Or if you do subscribe to podcasts on your podcast app on your phone, you can search for that original show or any of our past shows, or this one that will go live by the end of the week. So we hope it was informative and kind of gave you a good visual of the step-by-step process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully you just kind of finished it off for you, and you're not kind of lost. You've got this thing growing in your backyard.
Yeah. So then when do you when do you pull the trigger kind of thing?
Right.
Is kind of the question. And from the pictures I've seen posted online of everybody who's just experimented, there's all different sizes and shapes and So I think that's good because it's not everybody's growing the exact same thing, right? And much like tomato plants, if you think of an heirloom tomato plant grows different from a cherry tomato, from a grape tomato, from a hybridized tomato plant. So very different. So it's kind of the same thing.
I was just say maybe that's where that whole tomato thing starts to work its way in.
Maybe.
And some of the pruning things I've seen people talk about.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, that looks like a tomato diagram.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what is happening if we kind of go back to our regular scheduled, like beginning of our show, our segment? Yeah. So anything, have you harvested your potatoes yet?
They're almost ready. They're starting to yellow and die away.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting for them to yellow out and die to the ground. I'm going to give it a couple more weeks. It's probably about 3 more weeks away.
Oh, really?
Before they're totally ready. But yeah, I'm looking forward to those for sure.
Anything else you've got going on in the balcony?
Mainly just the annuals. My nasturtiums that we were talking about before, they've started to, I've missed a watering in the late summer. So they've started to yellow and brown out a bit. But I've been taking seed heads and flowers for salads and other stuff like that. And the annuals are just kind of blooming and doing their thing. I've got my, I'm going to grow Russian red garlic. So I've got that ready on the heels of the potatoes.
Okay.
Yep. I'm going to grow those in the container. So I'm kind of planning what my veggies and stuff are going to be for next year.
Okay.
So garlic, again, I'm going to give for a try for
a
sure.
really good shot. Okay.
Yeah.
That is good to know. Is there still garlic available to buy at the garden center?
Yes, and the bulbs are out, and the garlic is hitting your garden centers now. So go out. Elephant, I know at my store, the big bulbs are pretty much gone.
Really?
So definitely jump out there, but there's lots of regulars and Russian blues and all sorts of different varieties that are really neat to take out and take a look at and grow. For sure.
Excellent. And do you think the mail order, it'd probably be too late to even order a mail order?
I know from one of our suppliers that they're on time. You can still get some of those.
Okay.
Directly through their website. So it probably is. It's hit and miss. I would definitely give them a shout and a call, but it is garlic buying season. So.
Okay. And we should have the garlic in the ground by?
Yeah, anytime soon. Depending on the variety, like my Russian red says I can plant it in August if I wanted to.
Oh, okay.
But
should we have it in like October 1st kind of thing?
Right. I'm going to wait closer, till like August. Once we start to see some cooler temperatures. Or October, thank you, sorry. The got me.
Okay, so for our listeners who don't realize that garlic is something that you can plant in the fall and you harvest it in July. So it's kind of a different type of vegetable or I don't know whether, is it a vegetable? I think it is. But yeah, so a sunny spot. I think we're preparing to do a whole show on growing garlic.
Yeah, we are.
So that'll be all about that. I know I did one when I first started way back, I think 4 years ago. I did a show on garlic, but Matt's here to do to offer that expertise as well. So I'm looking forward to that. But that's something if you want to try growing it, and I think it's pretty innocuous or inconspicuous.
Yeah.
So you can definitely, if your son is in your front yard with your flowering shrubs and your plants, you can definitely plant some garlic in there and it's not going to be obvious. No. We already know you can't plant your cannabis in the front yard. You've got to keep it out of sight. But you can go ahead and definitely plant garlic in your front yard, and it really will blend in and you really won't even notice it. And it's a good, because it's in your site too, so that you remember to take care of it.
Yeah.
I found.
Yes. Excellent. Yeah. Good tip.
Excellent. So,
as we reach the last 5 minutes, anything else? How about your garden?
Yeah, I have to say I'm back from 10 days in vacation. I actually posted on the Ontario Gardeners Facebook page. My garden looks great.
Right?
I know. And I had a neighbor standing by to water in case, and she goes, it looked good. I never felt like I had to water. So no watering, and it looked pretty good. So some weeds and some little bit of deadheading, but not even much. I have to say I'm so happy with my little bobo hydrangeas. They're looking good. I don't know if you saw the one picture, my hydrangea standard is kind of leaning, so then it looks like it's blending in with the bobo below it. But so it looks like one really big plant, but really that's kind of 2 plants. So we've tried to stake this hydrangea. I think when I had my blue spruce there blocking the sun, it kind of grew at an angle. And even though the blue spruce is gone, and we've pulled it back and it's staked with like a metal stake, but it's still leaning forward. So I may have to just cut it back so that the new growth is all, although I don't like cutting back my hydrangeas, I like leaving the winter interest, so we'll see. And lots of people commented on how much smoke there is on my smoke bush, and that's all gone brown now, and it's kind of whatever. It stayed on to the shrub much longer than I thought. So
it still looks good. I saw a picture.
Yeah, so it looks good. So so my garden, I have to say, is doing pretty well. I didn't do well at planting garlic last year, growing garlic last year, so I'm looking forward to learning how to do it this year. I'm going to definitely move it out. I don't think it was in a sunny enough spot. It was kind of behind my yew hedge, and so I'm just wondering if that shaded it too much. that type of thing. So I'm looking forward to that. But overall, I'm pretty happy. And we can talk even maybe next week about bringing our house plants. So my tropical plants that I put in my containers, I need to start getting them ready to bring in if I'm going to try and winter them. So yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. I think so. What else are you going to say?
No, I was just looking for this sheet just so that as we go out with the last few minutes, we can say
we're getting the hook.
to all of our guests.
Yeah, the hook. 1 minute to go. I'm giving you the hook.
Thank you, Alexis, Kim, and Ty, for writing in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here again on Down the Garden Path on Reality Radio 101.
And thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.